countries that will get involved in the shooting war with Russia. That's what all this preparation is for. You heard about the Russians hacking. Well, you know who was hacking? It was John Brennan, the head of the CIA, that made it look like the hacking was attributable to Russia by leaving some telltale signs like Cyrillic, you know, like the name of the first KGB head. So there's all kinds of dishonesty going on there. And guess what? It wasn't, like the president says, a chemical attack on those poor folks in Idlib province. What it was, as far as we can determine, and we have some sources there in the military that are telling us, there was a huge chemical storage area that was owned and operated by Al-Qaeda in that part of Syria. Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, they're all kind of melded the same, okay? And there was a Syrian bomb from a Syrian aircraft dropped on this facility. And they waited for the secondary explosion because they were sure there were weapons there, bombs and everything else. But instead of a secondary explosion, a big cloud of chemical agent went up and blew south to that village and killed about 80 people, okay? That's what happened. So for the President of the United States to say it was a Syrian government attack, okay? A Syrian government chemical weapons attack on their own people, well, that's just as bad as when Colin Powell said here, a whole bunch of lies on the 5th of February 2003. I can't bear to think about what went on there to justify the beginning of the disarray and chaos and killing in that part of the world, in the Middle East. So all I'm saying here is that if you read the New York Times, you're not going to get the story. If you tune in, as you can, to the internet, consortiumnews.com is very good, and we have an MIT professor now who says that the intelligence community explanation of a four-page document they put out yesterday is a travesty. That the evidence they adduced could not be defended, and this is a prominent professor whose name will come to me in a second. Postel, Ted Postel, P-O-S-T-E-L. Look him up. He's saying that not at all is it the case that what the government is claiming would be the case. Even the evidence, such as it is, that they adduce is false or proven to be false. Now, what are they doing this for? Well, there's a whole bunch of people who want to make a dust-up with Russia. Why? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? Well, you know, it makes sense if you're manufacturing Raytheon Tomahawk missiles. There were 59 of them, right? 60 actually. One fell into the lake, right? 60 at a tune of 1.4 million each. So Raytheon stock zoomed up the next day, and that's what it's all about. What Pope Francis called courageously in our own Congress the blood-drenched arms trade. He said that's the main problem. And so we have to really kind of sensitize our neighbors and tell them, you know, don't believe what you read in the New York Times, don't believe what you hear from the podium in Washington. Do your own research and find out how close we are. It could lead to, you know, the end of all of us. You know, Trump is very bad on climate change, which means my grandchildren, 9 of them, may not have enough clear air to breathe or clear water to drink. But now it looks like he might even end the whole thing sooner if he provokes the Russians. See, the Russians are on hair trigger alert. We have anti-ballistic missile systems in place all around Russia, in Europe, and we have a couple in Asia as well. They think that our generals think that we could do a first strike and escape retaliation. Now, it doesn't matter, you know, what our generals think. They may think that, but if the Russians think that our generals think that, you know, the normal warning time was 20 to 30 minutes before they had to retaliate. Now it's launch on warning, which means you got 5 or 6 minutes. So, you know, everybody cares about life and all this city that we have here, that I was born in, and buildings and all that kind of stuff. You know, it could just go up. And nobody seems to realize that because there are very few of us used to hide under desks and think about all this stuff when it was real. Now it's just as real, and our leaders are much more irresponsible and likely to do things off the cuff. And if I were President Putin, I would say, my God, how do I tell these people how dangerous it is? And he's tried, and he can't. Meanwhile, there's this big campaign. You know, let's face it, Hillary Clinton was your senator, right? Now, she was so smart, and she was so favored to win, she couldn't have possibly lost because she was such a lousy candidate, because nobody trusted her, you know, could be. So they had to blame it on somebody. Now, this is the real deal. I mean, it's so simple. They had to blame it on somebody. 2 days before the Democratic National Convention, Julian Assange released all these emails from the DNC, which, what they show, anybody know what they show? They showed that Hillary had stolen the nomination from Bernie Sanders. Did you read that in the New York Times? No. What did you read? Who did it? Who did it? It was the Russian. It was the Russian. Some real bright person on her staff said, blame it on the Russians. Somebody goes, well, it wasn't the Russians, it was Julian Assange. Oh, that's okay. We'll say that Julian Assange worked for the Russians, okay? The crowning foolish thing is this. Why? Oh, clearly the Russians want Trump to win. Now, give me a break. I've been watching Russian politics and Soviet leaders for 55 years now, right? And I could just see Putin sit around, you know, with his advisors. Oh! During the campaign. Wow, this Trump, he's unpredictable. And he's proud of it. He brags about being unpredictable. And, oh, look at that. He takes gross offense and lashes out at the least slight, real or imagined. Oh, that's just the guy I want to have his finger on the nuclear code. Man, bring on Trump. Do everything you can to get Trump elected. Makes no sense, does it? So the major premise, Russians want Trump to win. You know, it doesn't stand up. So the rest of the soldiers and everything falls apart. But they need an excuse to explain their own ineptitude in letting this clown win. Okay? And then they're taking that out and using this Russian card in a way that's really irresponsible and dangerous. So be sensitized to that. Make sure you go deeper than the New York Times. And the last thing I'll say is that this Ted Postal has, for us and other people, come out with a very strong statement saying that the White House explanation of how it was certainly the Syrian government that attacked its own people with chemical weapons, there's no evidence to support that. It makes no sense logically, and the evidence that these 3.5 pages is used are just as bad as the evidence that said Russia turned the election for Trump. So there's a lot of deceit. It wouldn't be so bad if it didn't matter, but it really matters. Okay, our Secretary of State is just finishing talks now in Moscow with this opposite number. It's not going to come to a good end unless we can stop it. So thanks for letting me carry on much longer than you wanted me to, but that's the case as I see it. And you can always tune in to McGovern.com. I say unashamedly because my son runs my website, and a lot of this stuff is up there. McGovern.com. If you don't get it, you don't get it.